is called to order 11:01. At this time, we have invocation given by Alderman Pindell Charles, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Good evening. Today is Valentine's Day, a universal day to celebrate love. Unfortunately, there is so much division and turmoil in our nation and day. Too often we cannot find love, no matter how hard we may look. While we all try to practice love as much as we can, nevertheless, we all do it at times. And let's be reminded that love comes in many different forms under varying circumstances. The following passages represent one of love. If I speak in the tongues of men and of angels, but love, I am only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It is not rude. It is not it is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. It does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails. When I was a child, I talked like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became an adult, I put childish ways behind me. Now we see indistinctly as in a mirror, but then we shall see face to face. Knowledge is imperfect now, but then I shall know even as I am known. There are in the end three things that last: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. Amen.
Amen. Please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America.
Of the United States of America.
And to the republic
for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice
for all.
Much harder remotely. Thank you, everybody. Madam City Clerk, please call the roll.
Yes, sir. Mayor Buckley?
Aye.
Alderwoman Tierney?
Here.
Alderwoman O'Neill?
Here.
Alderwoman Pindell Charles?
Here.
Alderwoman Finlayson?
Present.
Alderman Shannon-Meyer?
Present.
Alderman Gay?
Present.
Alderman Savage?
Present.
Alderman Arnett?
Present.
Everyone's here.
Thank you. Mr. City Attorney, please present the first item on the agenda.
This first item, Mr. Mayor, is approval of the agenda.
This time I entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Thank you. Mr. City Manager, do you have a hand up there? Is that one? No? Okay. There's something on my screen, so. Okay, please call the roll.
Yes, sir. Mayor Buckley?
Aye.
Alderwoman Finlayson?
Aye.
Alderman Shannon-Meyer?
Aye.
Alderman Gay? Alderman Savage?
Aye.
Alderman Arnett?
Aye.
Alderwoman Tierney?
Aye.
Alderwoman O'Neill?
Aye.
Alderwoman Pindell Charles?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. City Attorney, please present the next item on the agenda.
Yes, sir. The next item on the agenda is a presentation by the Anne Arundel County Department of Health Officer Nilesh Kalyana Raman.
Welcome, Dr. K.
Good evening.
Evening.
Mr. Mayor, City Council, thank you for having me. I am Dr. Nilesh Kalyana Raman, the Health Officer for Anne Arundel County, and I'm here to share with you where we are with COVID and specifically talking about where we are with COVID in Annapolis. I'm going to give you a brief overview just of our current status, and then I will dive into some more Annapolis specific numbers. Overall in the state, and the county, we're seeing that our hospitalizations are coming down, and particularly in the two hospitals in the county, we're seeing hospitalizations fewer than 20 people in each of those hospitals. Those are numbers that are well within what can be handled during normal order of operations. Our hospitals, and particularly Anne Arundel Medical Center, are pretty much returning to normal volume, both in terms of their inpatient volume, but also in terms of those surgeries and other procedures that had to be deferred during the worst of the surge. We're seeing that our case rate is coming down to 13 and has been steadily decreasing. Both very positive signs, and that's really, that's exactly what we want to see. I think that we're truly have seen the worst of this spike during the winter. It was complicated by a few things. This is what happens during cold and flu season, and we had the Omicron spike that was timed to overlap with that period, and so we saw our hospitals get overwhelmed and have to declare crisis standards of care, something that they had not had to do until this point in the pandemic. And I think it is important to note that even this far into the pandemic, we are still working through the issues with COVID. This is, if we're going to take anything from this, I'm glad that we had vaccines. I'm glad that we had at-home tests. I'm glad that we had treatment options to prevent or decrease the chances of hospitalizations. Those all made this less bad than it could have been. And those are going to be the cornerstones of how we move forward. And so as we're looking at how we do indeed move forward, we're going to have to understand that there's a new normal. We don't get to go back to before COVID because COVID is here. But what we do get to do is keep our safety measures available and in place as appropriate. And then we escalate them or de-escalate them as we need them to. So I'd like to talk about tornadoes in the Midwest during the summer. People know that tornadoes are going to hit them. They don't know when, they don't know exactly where, but there's a tornado season. And everybody there knows to be prepared for that. And when there's warning of a tornado that's going to come through your area, you take the right precautions. Once it passes, you recover, and then you continue. And that is essentially what we are talking about with COVID. We're doing really well. We're moving towards greater comfort, greater sense of security. But in order to keep that, we're going to need to do 4 things consistently well on an individual level, and then 3 things consistently well on an organizational level. On an individual level, get vaccinated. Stay up to date on your vaccines. That's really critical. So that means get your 2 shots if you haven't gotten them already. That goes particularly for our younger set, our 5 to 11-year-olds. We've done really well with the 12 and above, over 80%. We're only at about 50% having even 1 shot amongst the 5 to 11-year-olds. It means getting boosted. So when you are eligible for your booster, get it. That offers a higher level of protection. Boosters are a normal part of vaccines. We have boosters for tetanus. We have boosters for the flu shot. What happens every year, it's booster. Get your booster. And then stay up to date on those recommendations. The second is making sure you have masks available. So if you are at higher risk, even as we move towards that goal of having a case rate of 7, when masks are no longer recommended, there are people who are going to be at higher risk, whether from health conditions or they're not vaccinated, or you're in a setting where there's a higher risk. Use those masks. It's one of the things we're doing at the health department is making sure that we're distributing masks so that people have access to them who might not otherwise have that. Third is at-home tests. Those are critical. They're a way to take control of your testing. It is a lot easier to, if you have symptoms or have been exposed, to roll up to your medicine cabinet, take it out, swab your nose, and in 20 minutes you have a result. For all of you who have done that, You recognize that it cuts out all of the logistics of finding a PCR, waiting for the results. That's been a key step in helping us curb this latest surge. It's also another thing that our health department, we were the first county in the state to aggressively push at-home testing. We started distributing them in November, and we are going to continue distributing them. And then lastly, if you do have symptoms and you have chronic health conditions, getting oral treatment. So there's oral treatment, there's also IV treatment, and that may be applicable for certain people, but oral treatment is certainly easier to access, to use. People are used to getting prescriptions and going to the pharmacy and getting them. And so if we do this recently, vaccinations, mask, testing when needed, and getting treatment as indicated, we're going to do a lot better. Recognize, how do individuals control this? It's still COVID, and COVID can overwhelm that, as we saw with Omicron. And so we're always going to have this push-pull between what do individuals need to do and what do we need to do as a collective, as a public. And so if there are too many cases and our hospitals can't keep up with it, we're going to need a broader, more public response. And frankly, if not enough people get their boosters or get vaccinated or test as needed or get treatment, we're going to overwhelm our hospitals again. So there's both that push and pull of individual responsibility, but also what happens when that gets overwhelmed and we have a public responsibility. On an organizational side, promoting all the things that I just mentioned are really critical. When I say organizations, I mean whether it's businesses, organizations, faith institutions, government, you name it. There's three things that need to be done. So all the things I mentioned, vaccinations, masking, testing, treatment, and then also ventilation systems. It's one of the least sexy things in the universe is to talk about ventilation systems. It's actually a really important part of how organizations can manage COVID, increasing airflow, increasing external airflow, using high filtration systems. We want all organizations and businesses to make sure that they're maximizing their ventilation systems. Having policies that allow people to take sick leave, that's a critical piece of this. We know that there have been times where people have been forced to work when they're not feeling well. That's how illness gets passed, and particularly with COVID, that's going to endanger your entire staff and potentially your customers, depending on what type of business you are. And if you're not a customer-facing business, if half of your staff is out, it's going to affect your customers as well. And then the third thing is promoting the individual steps. So creating either incentives for vaccinations or handing out tests, masks, taking proactive steps to support your staff in doing what they need to do. And those organizational steps are really important, right? The lower we make the barriers to all of these types of interventions, the easier it is to do them, and the better off we all do. Yeah. So that's kind of the global view of this. Now I want to dive into a little bit of specifics on Annapolis. You'll forgive me, we do not have Annapolis specific data. That was compromised at the time of the data issues with the Maryland Department of Health. We still do not have the ability, based on the data sets that we have, to provide detailed breakdowns for Annapolis City. As soon as we have them, we will resume the production of those data sets. So what I'm going to focus on is our interventions at this time. So I mentioned that testing is critical. With testing, we've been delivering at-home tests to a variety of partners in the city of Annapolis. We've worked with 45 different partners, ranging from nonprofits to faith institutions, and we've given out over 27,000 tests to those organizations to distribute to the population. This does not include the libraries or our health ambassador partners who have even more tests that they have been distributing. masks. We've distributed over 50,000 masks to 25 different partners in the city of Annapolis. And these, once again, does not include the libraries, health ambassadors, or the Parole Health Center. In terms of vaccinations and vaccine clinics, we continue to vaccinate at Pip Moyer, at the Lighthouse Shelter, at the libraries, both the Bush Library, Discoveries Library, and we are available to vaccinate at other libraries as demand is there. We've been at Mills Parole and Georgetown East, and we've also begun vaccinating at the Parole Health Center. I want to encourage everybody, if there are other sites or partners you think we should partner with, please contact the health department. All of the city council folks should have my email. You can contact me directly. You can contact our vaccine coordinator. We will add more sites. Essentially, the only limit is interest. We're ready to go anywhere to vaccinate. We're ready to partner with anybody to distribute tests, to distribute masks, and ultimately this works at a grassroots level. So that's the general overview that I wanted to share, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Alderman Chandelmeyer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Dr. K, for going out and vaccinating different communities, do we have like a mobile vaccination clinic, like get a van or a bus or something and actually go into certain neighborhoods that might be a little more isolated and be able to give vaccinations there?
So we could do that. We don't have a vehicle that does that. We're able to set up pretty much anywhere. So from rooms in churches to auditoria to school basements, whatever you got. So we haven't really found that we need a vehicle per se. If there is such an instance, we could work around it.
So there's no like vaccine van, but you can be pretty flexible about where you set up like a site. So
yeah, we've done stuff at dollar stores. We can go anywhere. That's why we haven't bothered with a vehicle, is because we can actually move much more easily with just our staff and their cars.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, Dr. K, we want to thank you. We met weekly.
Mayor, I had my hand up. I'm not sure if you've seen it.
Oh, sorry, Alderman Gay?
No, you're fine. I was just saying thank you, one, for the mobile wellness van that has been in our community every Thursday. I actually got my booster shot there about 3 weeks ago. And so I think people have definitely been taking advantage of it because it is so accessible to the community. So the response has been great there. So based off of what you stated, are you advising us that we're pretty much in the okay to kind of operate as normal? Maybe what is your best advice to moving forward, both indoors and outdoors? Like, would you say we stick with a mask recommendation outdoors for the general public? But as we get back to some of the warmer months, would you support the outdoor stuff? Like, what do you recommend in general?
Yeah. So as we're seeing the case rate come down, we want to make sure we push it down enough so that we don't see a rebound. We're at a case rate of 13, and we just want to get that down further. One of the biggest challenges we have is when you start decreasing those layers of those mitigation layers, you can see a rebound really fast. So we want folks to continue to mask indoors right now. But assuming we get down below 7, it's still important to remember that if you're not vaccinated or you have some chronic health conditions, it's going to still be recommended that you mask. This is why we really push the vaccination. It does offer not just protection to you, but protection to others in terms of transmission reduction. So as we get closer to that, we'll definitely be putting out information to the public as to what to do and how to protect yourself.
Thank you. And I just had one last quick question that popped in my head. What if it could, because I know for sure I've had 2 constituents that have reached out who are now unemployed due to vaccine mandates. Is the county recommending, are they eligible for unemployment, or should they how do you proceed with recommendations there as well?
Yeah, so they definitely should reach out to the unemployment office. I'm not in a position to be able to answer that question. I don't know the answer, but they should reach out and see what unemployment benefits are available to them.
Alderman Pindell-Charles, then Alderman Turner.
Mr. Mayor, Dr. K, just like to thank you all for everything, what you've done for us. You walked into a situation just at the right or wrong time, depending on how we look at it. But just like to thank you and your staff. You've done a tremendous job. You've been through some rough times, but we're just so glad you're here and glad for what you're doing for all of us. Really do appreciate it.
Thank you, and I will thank you for noting our staff. I believe we have the finest health department in the state.
Thank you. Alderman Turney.
Yes, thank you. Mayor, I just wanted to echo my colleague as well. And I just want to make sure that, you know, you're taking care of yourself. You've been in this whirlwind for, gosh, over 2 years. You do look a little rested. So, so thank you. It's just the least I can say.
Thank you.
All right, and I want to say a big thank you. It's been a great team effort. I feel like we talked every single week. We pivoted together. I'm proud of the job that Anne Arundel County has done, and thank you to your leadership and County Executive Pittman's leadership. I know we're in a lot better place than a lot of parts of the country, and this is the new normal. You know, we can't always have to keep our guard up, but you've done an excellent job, Dr. K. Thank you.
Thank you all.
All right, Mr. City Attorney, please present the next on the agenda.
Yes, sir. The next item is introduction of the City Council. Ms. Maggie Hughes, Executive Director of Annapolis Greens, the first ceremonial item.
Hi, Maggie.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. And is Elvia coming up too? Thank you.
I believe so, yes.
All right, welcome.
Here. And
right.
I'd like to introduce Maggie, if you don't mind.
Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So members of the City Council and Mr. Mayor and Mr. Gerald and everyone else, it's my pleasure to introduce Maggie Hughes. As of January 1st, I stepped back from the day-to-day duties of Annapolis Green and turned it over to the next generation. And that's what Maggie taking over is all about. She's got quite a bit of experience in nonprofits and in all of the things that Annapolis Green does, like events and public relations and getting the word out about climate change and other environmental issues. And Lynn was not able to be here today, but she joins me in welcoming Maggie. And we're very happy to introduce you to her. And Annapolis Green, without me, is going to continue to do good things for the city and the county. And so I don't know if Maggie has anything that she wants to add, but we're just thrilled that she's with us and you'll see her.
Thank you, Elvia. So kind words. I really appreciate all of that. And of course, I appreciate all of your guidance. Some of you I may have met before. You've probably seen me around at some of the cool events that Annapolis Green hosts, like Kick Gas. You know, we've done some other work with composting and also Plastic Free Annapolis. But I'm really just excited to kind of dive a little bit deeper, really work with all of you and make this city just as great as it's always been and continue the amazing work of Annapolis Green. So thank you for such a warm welcome, and I really look forward to working with all of you.
And come see Maggie in person at Green Drinks. It's
yes
in March.
Yes, March 24th, we're going to be at Homestead Gardens. Green Drinks is back. Finally, it's going to be bigger and better than ever. I can't wait to meet all of you in person, and I hope you'll join us. So keep a lookout.
And we'll be doing our Earth Day electric vehicle show on the first block of West Street in partnership with the Inner West Street Merchants Association.
Yes, looking forward to that too.
A huge welcome, Maggie. Thank you. And Elvia, thank you for all you have done for this city. You've left this place a lot better than when you started. You've given so much back, and we truly appreciate everything. I'm sure I speak for the whole council to tell you that we love you, and we know we haven't seen the last year. We'll see you around a lot, and I'm looking forward to your next venture.
Thank you so much. That's so nice to hear. Thank you all for your time. I know you have a busy agenda tonight.
Thank you. A little round of applause.
Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. City Attorney, please present the next on the agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Sorry.
one thing I just want to thank Maggie for coming before us this evening. Welcome, Maggie. And I can't echo enough what you've done, Elvia. Like I said, I'll never forget your name. My grandmother's sister's name was Elvia, so I won't forget. So thank you so much for all you've done for us. And Maggie, thank you and welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Arnett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Elvia, what do I do with all these corks I've been saving?
Give them to me.
Okay.
Or to Maggie. Or to Maggie.
To Elvia. Give them to Elvia.
Thank you again. Okay, Mr. City Attorney, please present the next on the agenda.
Yes, sir. The next ceremonial item is a City Council citation to Jeffrey Macris, PhD.
Hey, Jeff, I saw you pop up before. Are you coming up for us? Hey, Jeff, how you doing?
Hi, good evening, Mr. Mayor. How are you?
Welcome. Well, we want to say a big thank you from the city. I have a citation here. Just want to see if anybody else is taking the lead on this. Alderman Finlay, has a hand up?
Yes, I did. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It is a pleasure to present the City Council citation to Mr. Jeff McCree. And before I read it, for those of us who've been around for many, many, many administrations, you will note that Jeff has also been with us for multiple administrations and has never wavered in his support for the city in education and any number of other areas. So Jeff, this is just a small thank you for all of your years of service and all of your commitment to the city. And so I'll read now the City Council citation. It's also on the screen. It reads, City Council citation. On behalf of the residents of the city of Annapolis, we're pleased to confer upon you this Annapolis City Council citation in recognition of your tireless work as a charter member of the Annapolis Education Commission. You've been previously recognized for your education advocacy by Governor Martin O'Malley and by the Maryland State Superintendent of Schools. Your work at the local level, including 15 years on the school PTAs, co-chairing the Maryland State Education Family Engagement Council, serving on the Annapolis Cluster Redistricting Committee, the Anne Arundel County Public Schools Capital Improvement Study, and as a parent advisor on the Superintendent Search Committee, have helped to elevate parental involvement in public schools and ensure that Annapolis schools have a seat at the table when critical education issues arise. We thank you for your dedicated service to our children, Annapolis families, and the community. Presented to Jeff McCree and under our hands on the 14th of February, 2022, signed by the mayor and all 8 members of the Annapolis City Council. Jeff, a very small thank you for a huge job that you've done for us. So thank you.
Well, Alderman Finlayson and the other members of the City Council, it's been a great honor and a blessing to work with both our elected leaders and as well with parent volunteers and students. There have been great highs and great challenges that we've faced over the past 15 years. But I'm confident that we leave the commission in great hands, and we look forward to working as a parent with other challenges to come. So thank you again very much for the opportunity to serve the citizens of this city.
Thank you. And Mr. Mayor, you'll make sure he gets a copy of the citation.
We will make sure we get that to you, Jeff. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you again.
Okay, Mr. City Attorney, please present the next on the agenda.
Yes, the next item is City Council citation for Lawrence L. Harris Jr.
All right, and no, not here, Regina. Okay. Okay, well, we'll go on to the next one.
Yes, the next item is City Council citation to Juanita Cage Lewis.
Okay. If you want to come forward, Juanita. Can you hear us, Juanita?
Yep.
All right, hello, how you doing?
I'm good. What about you?
Right. Well, we wish we could be doing this in person with you. But it's great to see you and great to hear you. I want to thank you for everything you do for us and all the stuff you've done for a million years. I always run into you at things all over the city. So thank you. So, so on behalf of the residents of the city of Annapolis, we are pleased to confer upon you this City Council citation in recognition of your portrayal of Coretta Scott King during the City of Annapolis's annual Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. parades. During the Annapolis 2022 Black History Month celebration, it is important that we connect our residents with the history of our city alongside the rich cultural traditions and the history of the civil rights struggle in America. In your professional capacity, you have helped countless Maryland and Annapolis residents in your role at the Maryland Department of Housing and Community Development, serving under governors of different political persuasions, but always keeping your focus on the constituents that you serve. We thank you for all you've done to be a voice for our community and her residents. Your leadership has made Annapolis a better place. We all thank you. Big round of applause. Juanita, I'd love you to say a few words.
Yes, I certainly would. I want to say thank you so very much from the heart for this recognition. It was a nice surprise, and I appreciate you, and I know most of the aldermen, and I know, of course, Regina. So this was a nice surprise for Valentine's Day.
Yeah, all right. And you're a dead ringer too. You did a great job.
Thank you, thank you. I still portray Coretta in the community. Matter of fact, I'm going to be at the Academy on Friday, so I enjoy that. And I enjoy my job with the state of Maryland, which is most important, helping folks. And of course, as Rhonda Pendell Charles knows, we've been very active with Hurricane Ida. So it's a pleasure to work for the state and to work for the people of Maryland.
We thank you, Alderwoman Pendell Charles.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I can't say enough about Juanita. She's a critical part of our ward. She's always there when we need her. And even when we don't know we need her, she's there. And she's been extremely instrumental and critical in navigating the state government, the Department of Housing and Community Development when it's come to the tornado. And I don't know what I would have done without her support, without her navigation tools to help us to get through that. She's been special. She's always been special, but we thank you so very much from the community, Juanita. We really do thank you, especially for that, but for everything you've done over the years and what your family has contributed to our ward and to our city. Thank you so much. God bless you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. Okay, Mr. City Attorney, please present.
Yes, sir.
Item on the agenda. Oh, right.
Yep. The next item is petitions, reports, and communications, beginning with an update from the mayor.
Okay, so I want to start out tonight by sharing information about an incident that happened over the weekend in the Aubrey Court and Clay Street community. An accident where 2 children were shot. First, the children are going to survive. A 14-year-old male was released from hospital the same night, and the 10-year-old female is in stable condition. So thank goodness for that, because this situation could have been much worse. On the issue of transparency, I know that I want, and the public wants, all the information about an incident like this straight away. We push for transparency, but we can't expect the police to give the public information they don't have. It takes time. The police interview victims and suspects. They interview neighbors and bystanders. They seek to collect and process evidence, including ballistic as well as video surveillance from multiple sources. None of this happens in an instant. Let me share with you some of the facts as they have been relayed to me and my staff this afternoon by the Annapolis police detectives. For a more full accounting of the Annapolis Police Department posts, the most up-to-date information at annapolis.gov, search the keyword police media release. So 1, the shooter turned himself in about 45 minutes after the incident took place. The shooter has surrendered his weapon to the police. Annapolis police conducted a search of the home and found no additional weapons. Police sent charging documents to the court, and it is the court who make a decision about bail or whether to hold or release a suspect. Because juveniles are involved, there are legal protections and confidentiality that must be respected. But make sure you know where kids are, and make sure you please hug your own kids tight tonight. Thank you. On to a completely different topic now. The Super Bowl was last night, and if you watched the game, you must have felt like every second advertisement was about an electric vehicle. Tonight, we have a public hearing on O-40-21, the 100% electric mobility plan, which is part of our plan to move Annapolis to adopt and support electric vehicles and the necessary infrastructure. If all of the major car companies are putting this kind of money behind electric vehicles and showcasing that effort in a series of commercials during the Super Bowl, the most expensive time slot for American television during the entire year, well, then maybe Annapolis is onto something. So I want to thank the sponsors of R1222, a resolution to condemn all acts of racism and the many forms of discrimination and intolerance that have deprived people of human rights. I thank chief sponsors, Alderwoman Sheila Finlayson, as well as co-sponsor, Alderwoman Tyranny, Alderwoman O'Neill, Alderman Chandlemeyer, Alderman Pendell Charles. The Annapolis City Council and the City of Annapolis support the goals of racial equality. It is Black History Month, and I want to thank and acknowledge our recognition of the contributions of African Americans to our history and culture. Tomorrow night, we have our final Black Annapolis, a Black History Month conversation at the Bush Library and online on Facebook and YouTube. That is 6 p.m. tomorrow, Tuesday, February 15th. Then on the last Saturday of the month, February 26th, we will be hosting a Black Wall Street Business Expo at the Pip Moyer Rec Center between noon and 5 p.m. Stop by to learn more about Black-owned and operated businesses. And I want to pass along condolences to E.J. Jones in our Human Resources Department EJ lost her father, Ephraim Jones, over the weekend. It is always painful to lose a parent. We are a family here in the city of Annapolis, and we are sending EJ and her family love and light during this time of grief. The Department of Recreation and Parks is currently hosting Pass, Pick and Play, an annual sports equipment drive at 4 locations in the city. I want to give a shout out to the Armstrong family and the Lachlan Armstrong, a co-founder of the initiative and a junior at Key School. The drive accepts used sporting equipment, baseball, softball, basketball, hockey, soccer, lacrosse, field hockey, volleyball, and tennis. The drop-offs are between now and March 11th at Pip Moyer or Calvary United Methodist Church, at Key School, Discoveries, Library at the mall. Look for the bins, drop off these items that are unused and sitting around your garage or basement. Get a jump on your spring cleaning effort. And if you are in need of some equipment, come to Pip Moyer on March 26th between 10 a.m. and noon for the Pass, Pick or Play pickup distribution. And lastly, it's Valentine's Day, and I wish all of my colleagues here and the city staff, as well as all of our residents, a happy Valentine's Day. Sometimes it takes a day like today to remind ourselves and each other that we are a loving community. And most importantly, I want to recognize my amazing wife, our 2 children, my mother-in-law. Happy Valentine's Day to my family on this day and every day. I hope you all know how much you are loved. So now let's get on with the meeting. Thank you. Mr. City Attorney.
Yes, the next item is reports by committee.
Alderman Tierney.
Okay, first, let me hold up my love sign. Thank you. Yes, the Finance Committee met Wednesday, February 2nd. We gave a favorable recommendation for SA 1822, which will be on the agenda tonight. We recommended favorably Jim Cardillo to the Finance Advisory Commission. We had a update presentation by the city manager on the FEMA funding, specifically for the Compromise Street project. We postponed action on the sprinkler bill for some clarification, and we postponed action on the fee schedule R34-21 just to have some amendments on some pricing changes. And our next meeting is this Wednesday, February 16th at 10:30. And yes, we will be reviewing the electric mobility plan. Thank you.
Alderman Savage.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Environmental Matters met on last week on the 10th. We postponed a number of pieces of legislation just because we're still working 03821, illicit discharges and connections for stormwater. We'll be most likely be supporting the legislation, but we just have a couple of amendments we're finalizing. The mooring permits and forfeiture 0222, we had a bit of a dialogue with the Maritime Advisory Board and the Harbor Master. We didn't quite feel like that legislation was at a point where we're comfortable recommending, so we're waiting back for some information from the Harbor Master's office on that and the Advisory Board. We did recommend favorably 0522, which was Public Services, Water and Sewer. Our next meeting is going to be on March 10th, and I believe we'll probably be discussing the electric vehicle legislation as well. So looking forward to that.
Thank you. Alderman Shanamar, then Alderman Pindell-Charles, then Alderman Gay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Economic Matters will be meeting this Wednesday at 6:30. We'll be meeting virtually.
Thank you. Alderman Finlayson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Rules and City Government Committee met on Friday, February 4th. We spoke to two candidates for the Planning Commission, Mr. Zavakianis and Ms. Davies. Both received favorable recommendations from the committee. We also addressed 03721 exempt service position classification update, giving it a favorable recommendation. We addressed 0322 new singular wireless PCS LLC, and also gave it a favorable recommendation with amendments, the Tierney Amendment specifically, which you'll hear later. And 0722 rental operators license, we gave a favorable recommendation. The next meeting of the Rules and City Government Committee will be Friday, March 4th at 1 o'clock. It too is virtual. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Gay.
I think Alderwoman Pendle Charles was next, if I'm not mistaken, but I'll go. She doesn't mind.
That's
So we meet, the Housing and Human Welfare Committee meets the 22nd of February. We'll have a discussion with the No Harm group, VIP group, seeing updates on funding and also progress as it relates to the community intervention. We'll also hear from the Office of Community Caring Services as it relates to funding and updates on community intervention. So it should be a lengthy meeting. So looking forward to it.
Thank you, Alderman Pendle Charles. Thanks for your patience. I got lots of squares in front of me. I have to try to get them all in line. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, we had a very robust presentation by Annapolis Fire Department back on January the 24th for 2 hours. We met on February the 7th, and at that time, we recognized National Burn Awareness Week, but also we had a 2-hour presentation, which was excellent again by Annapolis Police Department. We could not get in all of the information nor all of the, we got in all of the information, but not all of the questions were asked and answered, were asked. And so our meeting has been continued, another meeting with our police department on Wednesday, February the 16th. At that time, at 3:30, I believe. And so we will also be taking up the sprinkler legislation as well as the panhandling legislation. And just as a point of reference, the panhandling legislation is strictly to add the penalty part of that legislation. It has nothing to do with whether we decide if it's constitutional or not, or any issues beyond that. Is strictly to add the penalty part of the legislation. I would encourage anyone, because we've had well over 6.5 hours of testimony from our police department over the past month or past 2 months regarding questions and answers. But I would encourage any community, if they were interested in getting a community meeting with our police department, to certainly reach out to them for a community meeting. I know we've had a couple of them, especially Eastport Civic Association. I believe that went for 3.5 hours. So we've had a lot of information given to us by our police department, and any community who wishes to have a separate meeting, please let us know, let the police department know. We will continue our robust discussions on March the 7th with our Office of Emergency Management, and that will be a 2-hour discussion as well as to what they are doing. And we're also focusing on their budgets as well and what their necessities are. Also, Alderwoman Tierney and Senator Elfreth and I had a conversation about a month ago. I know Alderwoman Tierney has some legislation regarding some first responders, but during that conversation, we talked about the police department and the need to recruit, whether it's cadets, but preferably officers. And so we came up with the idea of asking each alderperson to find one person in their ward to be willing to join and start with the police department. I think it behooves us to have someone, and I know we've heard the chief say it many times, someone from Annapolis, people from Annapolis, or who live in Annapolis who are interested in joining our police department. And I do recall several years ago when Dallas, Texas had the shooting, and Chief Brown at that time was asking residents, please come out and join the police department, and we will detail you and put you in your post where you grew up. And that way you have great camaraderie and a lot of relationship building when that comes about. So I'm putting that out there to my colleagues. You'll be receiving an email from me this week, and hopefully, I'd say probably within the next couple of months, we hope that each person can do that. We also asked and all state Senator Elvis said she would do it as well, and she would pass it on to her colleagues as well who represent us here in Annapolis. So I think if we came up with about 10 or 12 or even 15 new officers or cadets, I think that would bode well for our police department and those who are right here in our own backyards and in our neighborhoods. So thank you all so much.
Thank you. See no other hands up. Mr. City Attorney, please present the next item on the agenda.
Yes, sir. The next item is comments by the general public.
So during comments by the general public, the public may not speak on items scheduled for a public hearing tonight. When providing live testimony, you will only be allowed 3 minutes to speak. Legislation that's scheduled for public hearing tonight, where there will be a separate time to talk tonight after this initial public hearing, is 040-21, capital budget and capital improvement, the 100% electric mobility plan, and 0822, alcohol beverages for the Market House. So we have 4 people signed up for audio testimony. The first one is Beverly Reed. If you could come forward, Beverly, state your full address and name, and welcome.
Reed. My address is 331 Arundel Road, Brooklyn Park, Maryland, 21225.
Okay, thank you. Welcome. So go ahead.
Yes, I'm calling with concern of safety in the community. As you know, you were speaking of earlier about the 2 juveniles who was shot yesterday in an incident. And concern is that a lot of the places still doesn't have cameras and could have more police control patrolling the areas. I know you just mentioned about needing to hire cadets, to help with that. My other concern is too with the police department, as far as I heard, spoke with Detective Stanley Bradford when he first joined the cases, a lot of the cold cases and everything. He stated that he would be reaching out to the family members, kind of keeping them updated with the information as far as what's going on with their case. I had a son that was killed in on July the 28th, 2016 off of Ward Street. So I had the pleasure of meeting Detective Stanley regarding that case. And I was told that they would be reaching out to us and kind of updating us on the process of the case, and even calling on occasion holidays or the anniversary of a loved one. And I have had calls in the past, but not really initiated from them. I have called to find out updates on what's going on with my son's case. I do get return calls, and sometimes I don't get return calls. I don't get any answers. Also, I was told that from Detective Vidandra, I think he's also have joined a cold case unit there. And like I said, the action that I've gotten from them, which they have mentioned, he had mentioned in a news article just recently that the family, he may not get along with all the family members or, you know, have their, I guess, have their support. But he did also mention that no matter what, it's worth him doing the hard part, which is at the end giving closure to the family and everything. At this time, like I said, once again, I am the one who initiating the updates. We're not getting any information on as far as like when they get witness and all this other stuff. Lots of time they're not going through with it. And the other thing that I was told from Detective, excuse me if I'm not pronouncing his name right, Vino, was, I see that in that article how sensitive he was. And I just wish that they would show more of that sensitivity to the families of us who've lost loved ones. He did mention to me last time I talked to him that I need to give up on my son's case. And that's the sensitivity that the detective have there. Then, you know, I can understand why a lot of the family doesn't feel, we don't feel that we're important. We don't feel that our child's life is important. And we don't feel that they care enough to reach out to us on those hard occasions. January 11th was my son's birthday. They didn't reach out to me. They told me that they was gonna follow up an article that they had done last year on Channel 11 News, where they talked about my son's case and they still looking for, you know, still trying to solve that case. And we were supposed
Beverly,
to.
Yeah.
Yes.
I will make sure that they reach out to you.
Okay.
It's over 3 minutes, so
Okay, I'm sorry.
we are sorry for your loss. I know that they have got to the bottom of a lot of the cases, so I'll make sure they reach out to you. Alderman Pendell Charles, this is public testimony. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Mrs. Reed, thank you so much for bringing these matters to our attention. One thing about the cold case squad, I know we have Sergeant Redondo as well as Detective Noel, and one of the challenges that we have is, and I know the chief and I have talked about it on many occasions, including Deputy Chief Branford, is to expand the cold case unit. And that is something that they will be putting in their budget as well, to expand that unit, because they do understand that people want to know, want to get updates. They want to be remembered on certain milestone days. And that has definitely been a conversation. But we're going to take your testimony in great consideration. As the mayor said, we're going to take it back to the chief and the deputy chief. And Mr. Gerald is here, our city manager. But this is a great opportunity. We have Alderwoman Tierney, Alderwoman Finlayson, and Alderwoman O'Neill here, who are on the Finance Committee. Alderwoman Tierney is the chair. So this is something that they, I know, are very concerned about. But thank you so much. And we will take that information on. But let us make sure that we hear you, that you are in favor of us expanding our budget to include that. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Reed. Thank you. Next up, Michael Paredes, if you can come forward, please state your full name and address. Okay, next up after that is John Butler. Please come forward, John. Full name and address. Thank you.
Hello, John Butler, 407 3rd Street. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, we can hear you. Great. Go ahead. Thank you, John.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and other members of the City Council. Late last summer, I completed a 3-year term as court warden for the City of Annapolis. Over that time, I have participated in too many contentious hearings that I think are rooted in city code that defines the developable waterway for a property. Almost from the time that that code went into effect over 40 years ago, the city became aware that the code for lateral lines did not work well. Lateral lines are lines, for those not familiar with this, are lines on either side of a property's developable waterway. They extend from the shoreline to the harbor line. Evidence of the fact that this issue has been known for so many years is from a district court case in 2002. The finding of fact includes a statement from the disposition testimony of both defendant and the city employee who assisted the defendant with her application. It is clear that the defendant used property lines extended method for placement of her pier pilings because that is the method which the city employee instructed her to use. It is also clear from the placement of plaintiff's pier that the same property lines extended method used when the plaintiff's pier was built in 1988. The city employee testified that for the 15 years he had been with the city, that approach was used where there was an existing pier so as to give as many waterfront property owners as possible access to the waterfront. So you see, almost from the day our current code went into effect, city staff understood in many cases property lines extended provided a reasonable and fair way to determine and develop a waterway for a property. Further, port wardens approved such applications, even though they did not conform to city code. The property lines extended approach is not allowed under city code that has been in effect since 1980. By the way, that approach is no longer being used. As an example of this issue regarding lateral lines, a recent application came before the port wardens and it showed lateral lines cutting across from one marina, cutting across another existing marina. And it was in an irregular manner, and it's throughout Spa Creek on the Eastport side from 5th to 1st Street. And there's other places where that happens too. And these lateral lines are being drawn according to existing city code that's been in effect for 40 years. And we had an applicant come before the port wardens who asked for us to grant him an exception to the lateral lines for his property because the lateral lines drawn did not allow him to build a dock right out in front of his property. So, but there's no means to grant such an exception, and I'm not suggesting that that's a solution here. So I understand the Department of Planning and Zoning has been working on replacement code to produce more reasonable lateral lines. And I know that the council has a lot of important business before you, and this is kind of a niche issue. However, it's been in existence for over 40 years, and I think it needs to be addressed. It really complicates things for the port wardens and probably planning and zoning. I don't know that as personally as the port wardens. And it impacts all wards where there's waterfront property. So I ask that you do what you can to correct this long-standing problem.
Thank you, John. Thank you for your testimony. Next up is Bill Reichard. Please come forward, Bill. State your full name and address.
Yes, my name is Bill Reichard. I live at 717 Bay Ridge Avenue in Eastport. And Mr. Mayor and City Council, I am here to address the issues related to the 100% mobility plan ordinance and 0922. So I don't know whether I should address you now about those code sections or wait till they're before you.
You can speak on the second one and then come back for the public hearing on 0421. Is that what you'd like to do?
Well,
you get
let me do it this
3 minutes on each. So
I'm sorry.
So that way you'll get 3 minutes on each.
Okay, let me address first, I guess, 0922. In addition to the off-street parking requirements for food establishments, they will allow permanent outdoor dining in areas that were required for licensure to be dedicated off-street parking. This proposed change will increase seatings in those establishments and displace even more customers and employee cars to the already stressed free and unlimited parking on Eastport's residential streets, and will increase noise for nearby residents. Excuse me. You know what I'm going to do, Mr. Mayor, if I may, because my comments are written out on both of these statutes, and our recommendations and concerns apply to both. So if you will allow me, let me stop now. I'll use my 3 minutes when we get to 04021, and I will reference 0922 as it relates to the formation of a work group. You know about this, the work group between the ECA and the EBA to address both of these statutes, which we believe are interrelated. So rather than chop it up, I'd feel more comfortable in giving a coherent presentation on both.
Okay, we'll bring you back at 04021. Is that okay?
Terrific. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Regina, anyone else lined up for speaking? And Michael hasn't come back in. No. Okay, the City Council public comments web form submitted in writing through the online forum are automatically sent to members of the City Council and can be viewed on the city's website on the public testimony page located at annapolis.gov/1680/public-testimony. I declare comments by the general public closed. Mr. City Attorney, please present the next item on the agenda.
Yes, sir. The next item on the agenda is appointments, beginning with AP 1522, the appointment of Thomas Svekyanudis to the Planning Commission.
Well done on that. That was a good stab there. You got it right. So, okay. Can I get a motion to approve AP 1522?
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Second. Second.
Thank you. All those in favor with a show of hands say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Mr. City Attorney, please present the next on the agenda.
AP 1722, the appointment of Teresa Davies to the Planning Commission.
Can I get a motion for AP 17-22?
Moved.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Second.
All those in favor with a show of hands say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Mr. City Attorney, please present the next on the agenda.
Yes, AP 1822, the reappointment of James Tardillo to the Financial Advisory Commission.
Thank you. Can I get a motion for AP 18? Thank you. And a second?
Second.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor with a show of hands say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Mr. City Attorney, please present the next on the agenda.
Yes, the next item is consent calendar, approval of the consent calendar, including the approval of journal proceedings as listed.
Is there any objections to items on the consent calendar? Can I get a motion to approve the consent calendar?
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Thank you. Madam City Clerk, please call the roll.
Yes, sir. Mayor Buckley?
Aye.
Alderwoman Finlayson?
Aye.
Alderman Shannon Meyer?
Aye.
Alderman Gay?
Sorry, my apologies.
Alderman Savage?
Aye.
Alderman Arnett?
Aye.
Alderwoman Tierney?
Aye, thank you.
Alderwoman O'Neill?
Aye.
Alderwoman Pendle Charles?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. City Attorney, please present the next on the agenda.
Yes, the next item is business and miscellaneous items, beginning with supplemental appropriations, SA 1822, Grant Fund Transportation, Maryland Transportation Authority revenue.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve SA 18-22?
So moved.
Is this on the consent calendar?
No.
Can I ask a quick question then?
Yeah, can I get a second, please?
Second.
Okay, Alderman Gay.
Yeah, I have a quick question. So moving forward, will all of our grants received by the Transportation Authority be checked so that we aren't any compliance issues when we start to try to switch over to a more electric fleet? And I'm talking solely about like buses and small electric vehicles and stuff, excuse me. Because I remember we had that huge issue with the one grant that we were going to accept that was for like 3 and some change. And so has that been checked, or will that be checked in the future?
Director Dickinson.
So I'm not sure if that's directly related to this request. This is for a Skylift for the maintenance division of transportation. So I don't think that that would be necessarily applicable. If you're talking about the purchases of buses, I'd have to refer that question to transportation.
Okay, yeah, thanks. That'd be good if we could just follow up on that. I appreciate you very much for the explanation on 1822 Act.
We do have somebody who just came on from transportation.
Okay, is Kwaku?
Yes, thank you. This is for the Skylift for bus procurement. Currently, the Fed and the state fund them at the price of a regular diesel bus. However, if the city has money, they can add to that and get an electric vehicle. I would like to remind Council that the state is conducting a feasibility study for zero-emission vehicles or for transitioning to zero-emission vehicles. The study will be completed sometime this year. I believe it would be a good idea for the study to be completed. That will give you an idea of what it would take to transition to zero-emission vehicles. But this one specifically is on maintenance equipment for the maintenance of buses in the maintenance division. It has nothing to do with the buses.
Thank you, Kwaku.
Yeah, thank you for that. And so I'm assuming, yes, in the future, they will be looking at it just to make sure. Awesome.
Okay, all those in favor with a show of hands, say aye.
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 Opposed? Thank you, Mr. City Attorney. Please present the next item on the agenda.
So the next item on the agenda is public hearings, beginning with 4021 Capital Budget and Capital Improvement Program, 100% electric mobility plan.
Thank you. Bill, you ready to come forward again?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. Again, my name is Bill Reichart. I live in Eastport, and I am the president of the Eastport Civic Association. The ECA submits this testimony on two matters before the council tonight that directly affect the Eastport neighborhood. The proposed additions to the fiscal year 2022 capital budget and capital improvement program for the 100% mobility plan ordinance include electric vehicles, an electric ferry and dock in Eastport, and associated support infrastructure. The proposed electric ferry in Eastport will add even more visitor cars to the already stressed free unlimited parking on Eastport's residential streets. Let me be clear. The ECA supports modifications to the city code that improve our mobility challenges and lessen paved parking, both of which promote environmental sustainability across all of Annapolis. We believe that a more expansive and inclusive system of electric vehicles throughout the Eastport community and through all of Annapolis, coupled with better parking solutions, are goals to which we together can aspire. However, the ECA notes that implementation and use of electric vehicles is only one part of a comprehensive planning effort to address mobility issues, particularly parking problems arising from the renovation of the Hillman Garage and City Dock. Making a down payment in fiscal year 22 on an electric ferry cannot be viewed as a reactive quick fix for parking problems caused by renovation of the Hillman Garage and City Dock. Without a more thorough fiscal analysis for review and comment, it is premature to rush to put a down payment on an electric ferry to be docked in Eastport. Therefore, a down payment on the electric ferry, particularly in July of 2022, should not be approved at this time. As well, it is premature to remove previously required and approved off-street parking and increase allowed seating at Eastport food establishments before Eastport parking and mobility solutions can be put in place. The Department of Planning and Zoning should provide a detailed report describing how the proposed electric ferry in Eastport in O4021 would provide a cost-effective, equitable, needed transportation alternative for Annapolis residents, businesses, and visitors. The administration should provide more detail regarding the process for the city's grant applications, which clearly describes the level and expected sources of federal and state legislative funding support for the electric ferry project. We would be interested in understanding now and verify the degree to which there is existing federal or state commitment for such funding. The Department of, excuse me, the Department of Planning and Zoning should also provide a detailed report on the impact of existing food establishments displaced parking on residential parking in Eastport that would result from 0922. In reaction to both Ordinance 04021 and the anticipated Ordinance 0922, the ECA met with leadership of the Eastport Business Association, the EBA. We met with Alderman Ross Arnett from Ward 8 and Mr. David Gerald, the city manager. The ECA and the EBA created and have created a joint stakeholder group, the Eastport Parking and Mobility Work Group, to examine all aspects of these two proposed ordinances. This work group is carefully considering the impact of the electric mobility plan, elimination of off-street parking for permanent outside dining, and parking implications on the citizens of Eastport. I want to take an opportunity to thank Mayor Buckley, who met with us and when asked if he would support the work of this joint work group, said yes, and we welcome that, and thank you for that. We also welcome the commitment by Mr. David Gerald, the city manager, to continue to meet with us, and we have recently signed a letter agreement with the city to provide data, consulting services, and other information necessary for us to do our job and to give you feedback as to what this could look like on the ground. In short, this is a perfect opportunity for government and citizens and businesses to work together to develop problem solving on issues that will affect many aspects of our community. We recommend that the City Council and the administration wait to review the findings and recommendations of the Eastport Parking and Mobility Work Group before taking any further action on 04021 or 0922. Meaningful community participation is essential for good governance and any successful collaboration between the city's elected officials and their constituents. The mayor, as I've mentioned, the mayor and administrative staff have endorsed the mission of this group and are committed to cooperation with data exchange and consultation. We will continue to meet with City Manager, Mr. Gerald, and Alderman Arnett, and any of you as we go through this, and we'll submit comments and testimony at repeated and appropriate times to City Council and to committees. Finally, revisions to 04021 and 09.
Bill, that's two 3-minute things. So if you could just wrap up now, thank you.
Last paragraph. Thank you, sir. Finally, the revisions to 04021 and 0922 should be made to ensure that they are consistent with the forthcoming 2040 comprehensive plan for the city of Annapolis and with the latest traffic and mobility studies conducted in Eastport. The data and recommendations contained in the 2018 Eastport Parking Report, which is attached and sent to you, and the two referenced 2016 Eastport Parking Study reports are valid and should be applied to the parking impact of 04021 and 0922. And the renovation of the Hillman Garage and City Dock. As cited in the executive summary of the report of 2016, quote, "The time is overdue for parking in Eastport to receive the attention that its location, residents, businesses, and tax dollars deserve." Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Bill. I think we have no one else lined up to speak. Alderman Gay.
I'm sorry, my apologies. I didn't mean to cut you off. It's just because the screen thing, you know. Okay. But I just was saying, are these, is this public knowledge? Because based off of the other public comment we've received, I mean, it's almost if they don't know that these work groups are working to fix the issue that they're talking about. And so is this?
Yeah, we've had these, we initiated the working groups for the parking. You know, many of us think it's time for Eastport to have a parking zone. We are reaching out to the Business Association and the Residents Association, and we're working aggressively on that. So,
you have Mr. Mayor, you have Jake Iverson on the line.
Yep. Just answering Alderman Gay. Yep. Thank you. Next lined up to speak is Jake Iverson. Please come forward.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, and City Manager. Thank you for having me. Jake Iverson, 980 Awald Road, 21403. In reference to 040-21, Watermark has been successfully operating in the city of Annapolis for 50 years. We appreciate the partnership with the city and are looking forward to another 50 years of service and beyond. I support Mayor Buckley's Going Green initiative and believe that battery power is a vital piece of our future. An electric bus and carts are encouraging and a step in the right direction. Further consideration is respectfully requested and suggested for the battery-operated transport in the harbor. Watermark has operated the water taxi for over 30 years, providing service to both Eastport and Annapolis. In January of 2021, I met with the mayor and the city manager to share with them that Watermark is seeking opportunities to modernize the fleet of the taxis to incorporate batteries. The message was well received. 1 year later, I was surprised to learn that the city is looking into getting into the water taxi business too, with a free water taxi with service from Eastport and Annapolis. 70% of our water taxi business is from Eastport to Annapolis through the harbor. If the city were to add a free taxi, it would suppress Watermark's ability to operate our services to Back Creek, Upper Spa Creek, and the mooring field, including the anchorage. Watermark has been a loyal tenant of the city for 50 years. We pay the city for lease space at City Dock, as well as generate admission and amusement revenue for the city. We support local businesses in the downtown Annapolis area, bring in hundreds of thousands of visitors to the area who shop and dine, generate revenue for their businesses. Watermark employs over 200 locals from the city of Annapolis and surrounding areas, 35 of which are water taxi captains. I support the concept of the mobility plan, but believe that for the return on investment and safety for all involved, the ferry service should be left to the professional mariners of the existing taxi fleet. Watermark is poised to partner with the city to achieve its goals. Thank you.
Thank you, Jake. Okay, that was the last speaker. I accept into the record memorandum from the Planning Commission to Annapolis City Council dated February 4th, 2022. I declare the public hearing on 0-40-21 closed. Mr. City Attorney, please present the next item on the agenda.
Yes, sir. The next item on the agenda is 0822, alcoholic beverages, the Market House, for the purpose of modifying the type of alcoholic beverages that may be consumed in the Market House premises.
Okay, we have no speakers lined up for that. So I'm going to declare the public hearing on 08-22 closed. Mr. City Attorney, please present the next item on the agenda.
Yes, sir. The next item on the agenda is legislative actions on first reader, beginning with 0922 off-street parking requirements, food establishments for the purpose of eliminating off-street parking for bars, taverns, delis, restaurants, social clubs, generally relating to off-street parking requirements.
Thank you. Is there a motion to adopt 0-9-22?
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you. I refer 0-9-20 to the Planning Commission and the Rules and City Government Committee. Thank you. Mr. City Attorney, please present the next item agenda.
Yes, sir. The next item on the agenda is R822, public safety, distribution of literature to purchases of guns and ammunition.
Is there a motion to adopt R-8-22 on first reader?
So moved.
Thank you. Could I get a second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I should have been added as a sponsor also.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. City Attorney, please present the next on the agenda.
Yes, sir. The next item on the agenda is R-922, Annapolis Parking Concession Agreement, Pullman Garage.
Okay, is there a motion to adopt R-9-22 on first reader?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All right, no hands I see. All those in favor on first reader say aye. Aye with a show of hands. Thank you. Anyone opposed? Thank you. We are scheduled R-9-22 for a public hearing and legislative action on Monday, February 28th, 2022. Thank you. Mr. City Attorney, please present the next item on the agenda.
Yes, sir. The next item is R-1022, Itinerant Merchant Sales in the Historic District 2022.
Thank you. Is there a motion to adopt R-10-22 on first reader?
So moved.
Thank you. Can I get a second?
Second.
All those in favor with a show of hands say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Mr. City Attorney, please present the next item on the agenda.
Yes, the next item is R-1122, Nonprofit Vendors during Fall 2022 Boat Shows.
Thank you. Can I get a motion for R-11-22 on first reader?
So moved.
Thank you. Can I get a second?
Second.
All those in favor with a show of hands say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Mr. City Attorney, please present the next item on the agenda.
Yes, sir. The next item on the agenda is R-1222, Racism, Discrimination, and Intolerance.
Can I get a motion for R-12-22 on first reader?
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye with a show of hands. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to be added as a sponsor or co-sponsor.
So would I, Mr. Mayor.
I think we all want to be on this one, I'm sure. Thank you. Mr. City Attorney, please present the next on the agenda.
Yes, we're now in legislative actions on second reader, beginning with R-722, an emergency declaration concerning pollution discharges.
Is there a motion to adopt R-7-22 on second reader?
So moved.
Second.
In a second, thank you. I'm going to hand it over to Alderman Savage. Are you doing the First Amendment or not, Alderman Savage?
No. So, and thank you, Mr. Mayor. And so things have changed for the better since this was introduced. And I wanted to start off by saying that we had a tour of the site a couple weeks back. Some of us from the Environmental Matters Committee with staff and the developer. And, so they have responded very well. There was one other issue that popped up over the past few weeks, but they also have responded to that as well in a timely manner. So in summary, we've seen improvements, and I do want to thank all of staff's hard work on getting the site to this point and getting some of the, I know they're working actively on new procedures for enforcement. So I think that's all good. And Environmental Matters, we did invite or suggest to the Director of Public Works that he might want to, I don't know if he's here this evening, but we did suggest he might want to present today on an update on their end. But also just to say, a number of the amendments are in response to some of the projects that we've seen. It kind of changes some of the tone of the resolution in response to some of the other feedback we've received. So I'll stop there for now. Does the Public Works Director want to say anything?
Yeah, I think we should bring up the Director Johnson. Thank him for his efforts. Please come forward and update us, please, Director Johnson. Thank you.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. Happy Valentine's Day evening to you all. I just put together a very brief presentation. So I'd ask Julian if you could just load that and I'll take us through that. Could you go to the next slide, please? Okay, so the soil and erosion sediment control regulations, I'll just give a little background on it. It really was started with the Federal Clean Water Act, Phase 1 and 2 rules, which govern large and small construction sites. It also is governed under Title 26 of the Code of the Maryland Regulations, COMAR. And the City of Annapolis, it's enforced through delegation from the Maryland Department of the Environment, Water and Science Administration. And it's subsumed within Title 17 of our municipal code. So basically, it requires that all construction sites are required to comply with the requirements of the Maryland standards and specs for soil erosion and sediment control. And it covers all the areas that would make for a successful construction project and appropriate monitoring, planning and design, grading and stabilization, which is the most visible portion of a construction activity, water conveyance, erosion control, filtering, dewatering, and sediment trapping. Next slide, please. So the goals of the erosion and sediment control program really are to protect and maintain and enhance public health and safety and general welfare by establishing minimum requirements and procedures to control the adverse impacts associated with land disturbance. It's also to protect streams and other water bodies of the United States from deleterious effects of sedimentation, and to protect the city of Annapolis. This brings it really local, or more than 17 miles of coastline that enhance the quality of life and the economy of the city. So next slide, please. So how do we achieve that? So the city achieves that through largely through the grading permit process. So the grading permit is really a review of the planning and design for the proposed project. It provides regulatory conditions, stipulates construction conditions that will minimize sediment movement. It ensures that sites drain to sediment traps, so that sites which are not fully stabilized, any sediment that moves should make its way and be captured and filtered out in the traps. That stipulates work hours and periods and other conditions. The Department of Public Works has recently changed some of the enforcement, as Alderman Savage mentioned, protocols that we're following. So we've divided projects into 2 tiers. Tier 1 projects are sites that are 1 acre or less, and those tend to be smaller construction sites, such as maybe someone building a home or maybe a strip mall, something like that that's fairly small. And tier 2 sites, which are greater than 1 acre, those are typically like your large residential developments. Staff inspections are now performed utilizing a comprehensive inspection report that's placed into Trackit. It's along with photographs, and it forces the inspectors, or allows the inspectors to look at every portion of the site as they perform their inspections. And we worked through the prototype and came up with a model form that works really well. Takes them a reasonable period of time to sort of do the inspection thoroughly. And then this new protocol also follows progressive enforcement, whereby fines grow in severity based on the history of problems that we have at the site. Next slide, please. And these are just some examples of well-constructed ESC controls, erosion sediment controls. This is your silt fence in the first picture. This is a protection for a catch basin that is not necessarily in service yet. And this is, these are all details that are found in the state manual that are sort of implemented on a site that is sort of complying with that appropriately. Next slide, please. So even though, so why do we do all of this? I mean, it's really important that we are in the Chesapeake Bay. Now, Chesapeake Bay is a fairly significant land mass that, and water mass that drains, all drains into the bay. It's about 64,000 square miles. And even though Annapolis is a tiny portion of this, the environmental initiative is bearing fruit. And we know this because the University of Maryland Center for Environmental Science they prepare an Eco Health report card annually. And the Chesapeake Bay's metrics are improving, incrementally improving. So they scored 45%, which is 1% higher than it received in 2019. Some of the key pollutants, such as nitrogen, a nutrient that can cause dead zones to form, is scored about 64%, which is a major improvement over the number from 2019. And dissolved oxygen scores also improved, and chlorophyll A and phosphorus scores declined. Now, chlorophyll A is a marker for algae growth, and phosphorus, of course, is from our fertilizers. And all of those sort of feed algae and they contribute to deterioration of the water body. So I think that the long and the short of it is that the ESC protocols that exist in the state, that the city of Annapolis is delegated to enforce and that have been enforced with new protocols, are in our small part, even though we are a small piece of the big puzzle, doing our part to improve the health of the surface water bodies. And I think that's it. Next slide, if it's just questions. I would avail myself to answering any questions that anyone may have.
Alderman Tierney has a hand up.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Director Johnson. So these, what are these called? Are these your regulations in addressing this issue? My question is really, how are these set in stone? How are these transferable? That question came up at lunch today as far as, whatever we do to address this job, how does it get carried over into other jobs, other administrations? Do you feel that what you've done can be carried over from administration to administration, from project to project?
Well, it becomes part of the public works standard operating procedures for dealing with, it's a departmental policy. Now, departmental policy, of course, is not as robust as if it were part of the code. But the department has had consistency with how they've approached environmental issues over many, many decades that it has existed, long predating my involvement with it. And I think that we have policies that become part of the SOPs, the standard operating procedures that the department follows. So the inspectors, those who are charged with enforcing this code, this gives them a clear roadmap, some clear guidance as to how they are to sort of do their enforcement, and particularly when it pertains to citations and the level of severity of citations that should be applied and when they should be applied.
So if I'm a contractor coming into Annapolis and I have an earthwork contract, how do I know this?
This would be through the grading permit. It would be, this information would be relayed to you as you're going through you would submit your plans, and then you'd work with our stormwater engineers to get your plans approved, working towards getting a grading permit. At that point, we would relay to you how we plan to enforce the erosion and sediment control code, so that it's not a gotcha. We're not trying to do anything like that to anyone. It's clear to everyone how we're approaching it. I'm sorry.
Oh no, I'm sorry. So the objective is that this is all clear up front, which is
yes, very clear.
Very clear up front.
It's crystal clear up front, yes.
Right. So do you feel that if this was in place for specifically the Parkside Preserve project right from the get-go, would we be in a better place with the contractor, et cetera? Or is that a difficult question?
No, I don't think it's a difficult question. I think that the Parkside Preserve project allowed us to re-examine some of the, it's not that we didn't have protocols, we had protocols that they followed, but it allowed us to re-examine them and see where they were working or not working. And it allowed us, one of the big changes that came out of it was that we developed a formalized inspection report that requires the inspectors to look at every feature that is on the site every time that they're on the site. And this report is sort of then makes the inspection replicatable. So there's consistency between it, as opposed to what would normally happen is that you might look at something, if you see the silt fence, just to take one feature that could be a problem. You might spend more time looking at the silt fences and not look at everything else on the site. That could happen if you didn't have this inspection report that required you to look at everything. So it's like the checklist, like I like to use that. Like if I could segue just a little bit. Years ago, hospitals used to have strange accidents. You might go in for an appendicitis and come out without a kidney. And now how does that happen? Surgeons are very well trained. I mean, very, very smart, very well trained people. How does it happen? Well, they wanted to study to understand why it happened. What they found is that the absence of a checklist, which the hospitals use, and anyone's had surgery, you notice that they ask you several times, tell me your name, what are you here for? That's the checklist that's in place. And that has come out of the lessons learned from these sorts of horrific mistakes that can happen without a checklist sort of guiding you through the steps. So we borrowed that general idea and applied it to this, so that what we've given them, the inspection staff, is basically a checklist that they have to go through. So that way it is really very, very difficult, almost impossible to miss anything on the site. Each time the inspection is comprehensive. And that's really why I'm very comfortable with this approach.
So just to conclude, so like any other engineering project or construction project, we learn, from lessons learned. Most of our building code is built on lessons learned. So you followed that policy by addressing those in the operating procedures, the lessons learned, so that we don't have this situation again, in your view, or try not to have this situation again in your view.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Director Johnson. Let's see. Okay. Alderman Tierney, you're first up with the first two amendments.
Oh, goodness. Mr. Mayor, just one comment.
Oh, wait.
Just one comment. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Director Johnson, this was extremely helpful, and out of some things bring this about, and we're glad that we've gotten to this point. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you want to move your two amendments.
Yeah, amendment.
Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead.
Can I just, sorry to interrupt, Alderwoman, if I could just speak on my first one real quick that I'm withdrawing, just to give a brief explanation about why.
Okay, sure. Go ahead, Alderman Savage.
The amendment, because it speaks to my constituents, I think it's important to them. So the first amendment was going to basically ask for a revocation or suspension of the permit. I've decided not to introduce it because we have seen progress. We've seen increased responsiveness from the contractor on most issues. And so I'm not entirely sure that extreme measures needed at the moment. But that said, I do want to just say my constituents, I still have some constituents contacting me because some of them still do want that passed because they are understandably skeptical. It's not that they have a vendetta against this project, but they've been having to live with quite a number of frustrations from this project for the past 2 years or more. And so, I think they understand, and then they want to be heard. That's one thing they like out of this resolution, is that that option of suspension is that it would give them a chance to get heard. But hopefully they feel like they've been heard through this process. And lastly, just to be frank, I think just from hearing some of them, I think it is going to take time for them to rebuild trust with the city. And so I think hopefully I want to be hopefully a part of trying to restore that. And I think as we move forward, we can get to that point. But I just think maybe we could circle back at some point and talk about how we can help restore that and maybe meet with the public. Thank you. So I'm withdrawing that amendment 1.
Thank you. Alderman Tierney, Amendment 2.
Yeah, I move Amendment 2. If someone wants to second, I'll say what it does.
Can you get a second, please?
Second.
Second.
Yeah, my thought was if we were going to have this resolution, that it would be on the record, make sure that MDE, which is, as you know, the governing authority, would have this on record so that it, does something other than sit on a shelf or whatever.
Okay, let's vote on these one at a time. Alderman Savage is on the floor.
Yeah, wanted to just ask Alderwoman about this. If some of the later on amendments will be removing attempted to remove the mention of reliable, and your amendment would send this to be on file with MDE, in particular to this project. I still think it could be good to make them aware, but that we are passing this just in general. So I still think it'd be.
Okay. Well, then that's good to know, because this was specific. It seemed like when it was first written, it was focused on reliance, et cetera. So that I just wanted it then to go on file. So I will withdraw this amendment then. If we're going to be generic with how do we then say it's reliable if we take reliable out?
Savage?
So just quick on that. One suggestion, if you wanted to keep this, we could just, because it says, and be it further resolved that the Annapolis City Council, that a copy of this resolution shall be sent to MDE. And it goes on to say to be added to the record for the Parks and Preserve development. We could just cut it off at should be sent to MDE to be added to their record. And then they may want to see it anyway, because it'll kind of be a part of our sediment control program and show our commitment to it. So it might still be useful to do.
Yeah, sorry, I'm thinking out loud here. Yeah, so first I thought, it should be on their file, but MDE looks at projects too. So if we reference the project, I guess it would serve its purpose. But I think what you're saying, Alderman Savage, is just to be in line with the other amendments is to get out any wording that says reliance.
Yeah, if you just stop it right after record, so a copy of the resolution will be sent to MDE.
Can I ask you to just do a friendly amendment on the floor to revise it?
Lyles? No.
Friendly amendment has to come from you, your amendment of your amendment.
Yeah, guess I should have asked wordsmithing. Yeah, I accept what Alderman Savage said as far as stopping the language. Oh dear, I just lost it here.
You have to say the amendment so that we can report it appropriately.
Yep. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Hold on.
Point of information while he's working on that, may I?
Yeah, Alderman Finlayson.
Yes, and I guess this is a question for Mr. Johnson. What records does MDE maintain? They have been down, I believe, and have, investigated the site. So do they maintain all of the records indicating their involvement with the project beyond the completion date of the project?
The MDE, there are certain statutory submissions that are required to be made to the MDE pursuant to erosion sediment control. And the NOI form, which is the notice of intent, which is really the requirement that the contractor performs erosion sediment control inspections, and those forms are required to be sent to the MDE and are kept as part of the records. If there are any infractions, like if they had to perform a site inspection based on a complaint or based on their own initiative, those would also be part of the permanent record for the particular project. I suppose if you were to send them some kind of legislation pertaining to a project, it would also become part of the record. I would assume they would basically keep a record of everything that relates to the project that is statutory as well as probably sent to them from a legislative body such as yourself.
So Alderwoman Tierney, maybe it's not necessary.
They keep a record, as the director said, of the projects and their inspections and et cetera, et cetera. So to your point, Alderwoman Finlayson, they know what they have dealt with. Let me propose amending it as follows, because it doesn't do any harm. It's just a statement. So it would be revised to say, if I may, on page 4 after line 3, insert be further resolved by the Annapolis City Council that a copy of this resolution shall be sent to the MDE to be added to its record. Of inspections for the Parkside Preserve Development Site. Period.
Okay, you got that?
If I might,
go ahead.
Sorry, if I might, I don't think that it would be part of the inspection record. It would be part of maybe the project record in some sense, in some way, but it would not. Okay. It's not really an inspection. Their inspection records would probably relate to what they've inspected.
Okay, so less is more here. Then let me
Might I suggest something?
Yep.
Yes.
Might I suggest that a period be placed after the word shall be sent to MDE, period. Because we can't mandate MDE do anything. The only thing we can do is send it.
Right. And from sending it, they'll know what project it's on.
The caption, the sentences, the documents, the wherefores all indicate what it's related to, but after it gets there, they do what they do with it.
Okay. That does serve my objective, Mr. Lyles. So yes.
So you need a motion to amend the amendment as stated. And the second, and then Mr. Mayor, you can vote on that, and then you can move the amendment.
Yes.
Can I get that, please? A motion. Thank you.
I move that we amend amendment number 2 and put a period after.
A second to that, please. Someone.
Yeah.
Second.
Thank you.
And strike everything after MDE. Would be part
of that, Regina. Okay.
Sorry that took so long.
All those in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
Thank you. Now
you have to move the whole amendment.
Okay, can you move that, please, Alderman Tierney?
I move that we amend. I move that.
Okay, thank you. Can I get a second?
Second.
All those in favor with show of hands, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Okay, now we're going to move on to my amendment. My amendment is, if I could just move that and get a second, please.
Second.
Amendment number 3. And my amendment is just that we approach MDE about increasing the fine amounts. The city did exact the maximum fines on this project. I want the public to understand that. We were constrained by what we have to work with. So we will reach out to see if we can impose greater fines that are more of a deterrent. So that's something we will work on. Any discussion on that? Alderman Savage?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, just a question for the city attorney. Do you think should this be addressed to MDE or our state representatives? Who do you think is this the best party you think for it to go to, this kind of thing? Because I'm just trying to think of who sets the fine limitation.
The legislature sets the fine limitations. The Senate and the House.
So
the
should
fine
this
limitations are set by the governor, or signed by the governor. They pass a bill. Bill maximums are set in code. I mean, fine maximums are set in code.
So I'm wondering if we should say the General Assembly instead of MDE, or put an end with the General Assembly, or is this fine as written?
I think it's symbolic. We're going to work with MD&E and go to the appropriate sources when we have to do it. So, and I would encourage all of our council to reach out to our legislators to point out the position that we've been in.
Okay.
Any other comments? All those in favor with show of hands say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Thank you. Now we're on to Savage amendments 4 to 6. Please move those. Alderman Savage.
I'd like to move them separately because some of them are, I'm not going to introduce all of them. So anyway, I'm going to move Amendment 4.
Okay. Thank you. Could I get a second, please?
Second.
Thank you. Can we get explanation?
Yeah, so Amendment 4 just strikes on page 2, lines 1 through 31. And so it strikes kind of the specific mention to and of reliable and of that project. It removes that language and puts in some general whereas clauses that just talk generally about the pollution that entered the park in terms of, and how there were continued violations on the site, or not on the site, just how it talks about generally how certain contractors had repeated violations, and just talks about how enforcement agency has at times required 5 days to resolve resolutions. Talks about how the recent violations just show that there needs to be a review of our enforcement program, essentially, and then mentions that stop work orders were not issued for the past few violations. And so it just kind of establishes, my intention was establishing the background to explain why there's language in here about trying to steer the enforcement in a different direction. That's my intention.
Thank you. Any questions on that? Okay, all those in favor of amendment number 4 with a show of hands say aye. 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 Opposed, say no. Thank you. Alderman Savage.
Amendment 5, I'm not introducing. I'm going to go with Finlayson Amendment number 7, which I think is better.
Amendment number 7, Alderman Finlayson's amendment.
Yeah, so I'm not doing 5. So I'm going to skip to number 6. And yeah, so I'd like to move, move number 6 first of all.
Thank you. Could I get a second, please?
Second.
Second.
Thank you. Alderman Savage.
And so this one just adjusts the language to mention that if there are significant instances of offsite pollution that, I'm sorry, this one I think also, sorry, let me read through this. I'm not gonna, can I withdraw my motion on this one? I want to make sure
we
it
have
doesn't.
A first and a second. What can we do, Mr. City Attorney? Sorry, you I'm
sorry. You have to vote on it because you got a motion in a second.
Okay. So this might get changed by the Finlayson amendments. I'll have to check. But in any case, this one, what I put in here is just to refine the language to say if there are more instances of significant pollution that happens where there are multiple deficiencies on the site and where there is potentially a threat to public safety and the environment, it kind of expands upon the language to make it clear in terms of when a permit might be suspended or revoked. And so this just kind of, again, creates more clarity on when that could potentially be utilized.
Mr. City Attorney?
Yeah, I have another idea. Alderman Savage, you could move to table, which supersedes all of the motions, and just sit it on the table indefinitely.
So it could sit on the table till we get till 12, is that right?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Let's move
I'll
to
table it
table.
for the moment. Okay.
Okay, let's table it. Thank you. Alderman Finlayson, amendment number 7.
Well, should I set mine on the table until we're finished with all of these also? Okay, my amendment 7 speaks to eliminating page 3, lines 9 through 11. This says a stop work order. Well, what should be inserted is a stop work order shall be issued to any project that has an off-site illicit discharge caused by contractor's negligence. And this enforces and defines force majeure. We're all learning new terms with this legislation. It is unclear, and this is my justification, and thank you, Mr. Johnson, that we're asking 100% compliance for, we're trying to define. Okay, so the question is, would it be different if the site was 100% compliance and a discharge still occurred? Would it still be a stop work order? And so the question is, are we clear on exactly why we're issuing a stop work order? Could one small thing, or maybe not so small, trigger a nuclear option, which is the stop work order? Or are there other considerations that should be included? And I think Alderman Savage said that he was in agreement with amendment number 7.
Not sure, did we get a second on that? I'm sorry.
I'll second that.
Thank you. And that question was for Alderman Finlayson.
I'm sorry, I don't know.
You got a motion and a second on amendment number 7.
Yes.
Yep.
It's ready for a vote.
Yep. I think you don't need an answer, so. Okay, all those in favor with show of hands say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Alderman Finlayson on amendment number 8.
Okay, number 8 says that we will, page 3, lines 12 through 14, delete, strike through, and insert a stop work order shall be issued if the contractor makes no effort to remediate the conditions identified in the field correction order within the time frame given. And I am changing the language to make it, well, to allow it to conform with not only county procedure, but state procedure. And the lengthy justification that I provided you gives you the exact language from the county. So our standards should not be different. We should be maintaining the same standards that the county uses. And so the county in their code, and you can read it, I'm not going to attempt to read it for you. So it's just to allow us to conform with the county standards.
Can I get a second on that, please?
Second. Question.
Yep. Alderman Pendell Charles had a hand up.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Alderman Finlayson, I have a question because this is the first time I've seen justifications. Did this basically come from Director Johnson?
Absolutely, it did. I went to the people, the professionals, with questions. And my questions were answered by Mr. Johnson to help me understand where there were voids in my mind. And so, yes, this language comes from the professionals that we've hired.
Because this is really good. It's very helpful. Maybe in some other instances, we might want to try this as well. So thank you.
I'm sure they all appreciate this lengthy treatise on this amendment, but yes, thank you.
But it's helpful. It's very helpful.
Well, good. Thank you.
Alderman Savage, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I mean, just to clarify, I mean, the amendment itself is just that one sentence.
Yes.
Yeah.
All the rest of it is just the justification for that one sentence.
All right. All those in favor with a show of hands say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Alderman Finlayson, amendment number 9.
Number 9 is to delete lines, page 3 again, lines 30 through 34. And the reason for the deletion is it suggests that we tell the contractor how to fix the problem. And the justification is we tell them how to fix the problem. It doesn't work. The responsibility falls to us. We are not, for the most part, the professionals in this capacity. So the correction or the amendment would be to tell them that there's the problem and allow them to use their professional knowledge to fix the problem. And if they don't repair the problem, then we have a recourse to come back to say, we told you what was wrong, we asked you to fix it and you didn't. Otherwise, they can say, well, you told me how to fix it and it didn't work. So it's not my fault, it's yours. Does that make sense?
Yep. Can I get a second, please?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Alderman Savage.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this amendment I don't support, and I have an amendment to fix the language to make it means and methods, which is what I meant instead of ways and means. But in any case, let me explain on why I think it's important to keep the proposed language. And while I hear the concern that if the city requires that X be done and X still allows for the pollution to happen, and there's the worry that this would put the city at some kind of liability or risk if something still goes wrong. So in this case, if there's pollution that still leaves the site. And there are two responses to this. First of all, the city code specifically says that the contractor owner is the responsible party when it comes to needing to comply with the standards and goals of this code, not the enforcement agency. And second, this could easily be addressed in the field correction notice by saying that, we want you to do X because, basically just saying that these are minimum corrective actions that must be taken. Additional practices may need to be implemented to prevent pollution, that kind of thing. So we make it clear that we're setting the floor, not the ceiling on what the contractor needs to do. The other reason I think why it's important to keep a proposed language is because I do think that there are times when there are means and methods may be necessary to be provided. So for example, the city code states that field correction notices, quote, must detail the required corrective actions. Now this language comes directly from the state model ordinance from MDE. And I'd argue that you can't detail the required corrective actions without sometimes detailing what those actions are, i.e. detailing the means and methods. Furthermore, my language states that the means and methods of correcting the deficiency shall be provided if rapid urgent action is needed. It doesn't say it has to be done all the time. It just says if it's needed. And I think that's important to point out because when you're talking about environmental pollution prevention laws, let me just give you an example. If there's something where, for example, if we feel like there's something that needs to be done on the site For example, if there's just a bunch of muddy pathways through the site, the area is not stabilized, and we tell them, look, you need to, you're in violation of the standard, which requires that to be stabilized. They may go ahead and do something that's insufficient. They may go ahead and just put down what they're, some sites are doing now, which is just called soil cement. And if that proves to be insufficient, so if, for example, they put that down, they have pollution the next day, they'll come back and say, well, we put down the soil cement because we think it complies with the standard. You didn't tell us how to do it. And so the challenge is that, again, sometimes we may need to be specific to say, well, you need to be putting down, we're having rain tomorrow. We need you to put down or install X, Y, or Z method. Might need to spell it out, because if we wait and if we have the contractor do things how they see best, in some situations that might not be the best thing, and we risk having more pollution happen. So I think we may need to at times give them a direct requirement, which we have done before, and explain to them, for example, you need to put down 6 inches of stone on a path, or you need to stabilize X, Y, or Z, because they just might not do it sufficiently. And so I'd suggest, again, it's not that I don't think staff should be doing this all the time, but I do think they're confirmed to remember that the primary goal of this code is to liberally construe the code to accomplish the goal of pollution prevention. And if that means providing means and methods, then that's what it requires. But we just can't always risk the developer taking their own time and their own measures if they're not going to be effective. I just think it maintains the flexibility of our enforcement staff to be able to do that if they need to. And so that's why I think it's important to keep it in there. So that's why I don't support this amendment.
Mr. Mayor, may I?
Response? Yep.
Yes, actually, I'm going to call on, if I might, if you would, Mr. Mayor, call on Mr. Johnson to get his response. Because my initial response is we're hiring professional contractors who know what they're doing, and to assume that we have to tell them just, so anyway, let's ask Mr. Johnson how he would respond to that, please.
Director Johnson.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. The problem with stipulating the means and methods of the work, which by long established precedent are exclusively the domain of the contractor, is primarily this: that if you tell the contractor exactly the method to use and the means to use, like exactly how to fix it, what machinery to use, what level of manpower to use, in what sequence, and what phasing, if that does not work, you would not be able to write him a citation for that, because he did exactly what his defense would be very simple. He could say, I wouldn't have done it this way, but the city directed me to do this. I knew it was wrong, but I was directed by the city to do this. And clearly I would not have, this is not the way you would normally do this at all. The city really then defeats itself by providing the means and methods of the work. And this is why, and this is me as a layperson speaking, I'm not, everyone knows I'm not an attorney, and the attorney may give a more deeper explanation on it. But this is primarily why, in long established precedent in any construction activity, the means and methods are the domain of the contractor. They're not, the owner never provides the means and methods. And that's really why I would recommend that we not do that. Our job is not to be an expert in the construction area, but it's to enforce the code. So we can't enforce something if we tell them what to do, and what they did doesn't work.
Thank you.
So there's 3 hands up. Alderman Shannon was first, then Alderman Pindell-Charles, and Alderman Tierney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So something I'm actually kind of confused on, Director Johnson, so that you mentioned like in your slightly earlier, you were saying that sometimes our inspectors may not know how to actually address the issue, or did I misinterpret that?
No, that's not what I said. The inspectors know what to do. They do know what to do. They're just not, for the reason I just said, they're not providing the answer to the contract.
And then Alderman Savage, so you said you had another amendment that may kind of be a halfway middle point between this. My question for you is, in some situations, couldn't there be multiple ways to solve the problem? So the city giving like, this is the only way we want you to do it could potentially tie their hands more than is necessary, or force something that could actually be slower to addressing the problem, or stop like a potential creative solution from coming out.
Yeah, is that a question from?
Yes, that was a question for you.
So there are often multiple ways to achieve compliance, but my concern is that some of those, they're not always going to check with city staff in terms of what action they take. So in the case of the disturbed areas on the site, the standards say they're supposed to be stabilized a certain way, but they may choose some other way and say, oh, well, we're doing this because we feel like it's compliant with the standards, but in reality, it's completely ineffective. And so if we're afraid they're not going to be taking adequate action, we may want to just specify very clearly what they do need to take. I mean, we do this with other things in terms of paving. When there are deficiencies with paving, we tell them very clearly, you need to be doing X, Y, and Z to remedy. So I think it's all a matter of the wording. If we just simply say, you need to take these steps, but these are minimum, and you need to do, you may need to take additional steps to stop any kind of pollution. That kind of sets the floor and not the ceiling.
And if I might just say, one of the reasons why in our revamped protocol we are using like a progressive way of enforcing is that it addresses the very concern that Alderman Savage is raising, but it keeps the onus for compliance with where it belongs correctly with the contract with the developer. The city shouldn't share in that liability in any way, shape, or form. And if the developer fails to comply with the standards, and you did have a discharge, we have available to us significant police powers, if you will, that can be used to enforce. It can be fines, it could be a civil action, it could be suspension or revocation of the permits. I mean, it can be fairly significant to the particular party, but that is the role that we play. It's not that our engineering staff or inspector staff do not know the answer. They do know the answer, but it is a matter of whether or not you want to sort of share in the liability that the particular developer has. I mean, he has the expertise, he has the means and the methods of doing the work, and that's really where it should end. The city should not really be dictating, other than if we developed the specification, we said we would basically say comply, your work is not complying with the specification. We wouldn't say bring a roller out and make 3 passes and change the weight of your front roller. We wouldn't do that, because if the road then fails, he'll be the first person to point out, well, you told me exactly what to do. I wouldn't have done it this way. I mean, this kind of road has whatever good condition, and this wouldn't be appropriate, but you told me what to do and I did it. So, you've given him a get out of jail free card right away. So it's really a practice that has long precedent in construction in the United States. It's got many, probably more than a century. It's not a practice that we would or should follow, in my opinion.
So it's essentially
the city manager. Sorry, Alderman Shannon, I know you have a floor. City manager wants to weigh in here.
Unfortunately, you're stuck with having two public works directors on staff. So there's a relatively simple way to deal with this. So I agree with Director Johnson. It's a cardinal rule in overseeing contracts that you tell them what the problem is and not how to solve it. But what we can ask is when they come up with the solution, you can ask them to run that by the city before they implement. That way the city has a chance to review the proposed solution and give their concurrence and without dictating, what gets done or how it gets done, how the solution is implemented. That would be my recommendation, is just to have the contractors submit their proposed solution to the city for review and concurrence.
Would that be a good middle ground, Alderman Savage? That way we can either give it an up or down.
Possibly. I'm gonna work on language right now, possibly.
I yield my time.
Thank you. Alderman Pendel Charles.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think everybody touched on exactly what I was going to say. And going down the road of dictating, we run into the issue of liability. That's kind of, and I know Mr. Lyle's ears perked up on that because, and my mantra is 80% of all questions in the world can be answered with one word: liability. That's where everything emanates from, the rules we have, whether it's city, county, state, federal. It's usually liability had dictated whatever came after. And so the more nuance we get, the narrower we get, the more we run into the problem of liability. I'm going to say what folks have said about Alderman Dick Israel years ago. I may be an attorney, but I'm not the city attorney. But I'm saying we can't go down that road. It's a bad road to go down. And the more we can leave it open, and I agree with Mr. Gerald, if there's an issue, then that's something that they can work out amongst themselves. But the last thing we want to do is get ourselves tied up into some litigation. And that's where we're headed with all of this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alderman Tierney.
I think I'm going to be a little bit, thank you. I think I'm going to be a little bit redundant, but this is a real slippery slope and it has been litigated in the courts before. Just for background, means and methods, it's strictly the techniques and tactics, sometimes temporary structures that a contractor does. And the contractor / developer, whoever is assigned to do the work, is responsible for the execution of the work, including means and methods. It's an absolute. It is dictated by law cases. Like I said, this has been litigated. We do not want to go down this slippery slope. It is a clear line that the contractor who's assigned to do the project is responsible for means and methods, period. That's my statement.
Thank you. Alderman Savage is next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So just a question for Alderman Tierney. Are you suggesting it'd be good to remove that means and methods language?
Yes, we don't want to fool around with means and methods or make any suggestions. It would set an awful precedence leading right to the road of liability that we do not want, nor do citizens want, nor do anybody else commenting on what they think, how something should be done to get from point A to point B. The contractor developer is responsible for executing per the contract document. So if there's a means and methods that somebody suggests, it ultimately has to be part of the contract documents, or there could be a lawsuit or any other unintended consequences. It's just an absolute in the construction world. There's no question about it. I think Director Johnson would agree with me. I think he is agreeing with me.
Yes, you're correct. You're correct.
Okay, well, maybe it's just the term that folks are getting hung up on, because I think it's kind of a fine line in enforcement. You know, you can tell them that they're not compliant with a certain standard, but you know, again, with the environment, you can't be diddle-dallying with the contractor for 2-3 days if they need to get something done tomorrow the correct way to prevent pollution, right? So that's the concern. And so that's why sometimes as an inspector, and it's not just for the environment, they do it for building code inspection too. I've got fuel correction for my porch. It clearly says what I need to do. It doesn't reference the code. It says you need to put in X, Y, and Z, right? And because it's not up to standard. But and that's kind of what you have to do occasionally with enforcement. You do occasionally have to tell them, you need to put silt fence up in this corner, and you're assuming they know, the correct standard for the sediment control for the silt fence. So that's why, again, I think the code and the state model ordinance repeatedly says you have to provide detail the required corrective actions. So, if the director feels like he can provide adequate and detail adequately the corrective actions without providing means and methods, I think that's important to know. So I guess that'd be my one question for the director.
Alderman, I think that there's a way to, in addition to the method that City Manager Gerald mentioned, you could also refer them to the governing standards that they have to comply with. That you would point out that your silt fence is not in accordance with whatever the state standard is that governs it, and you give them what to cure and by when. But you wouldn't go into telling them how to install. Look, this is how you install your silt fence, put it so many feet apart, blah, blah, blah. Because then you start to get into the means and methods that Alderwoman Tierney and others have mentioned is problematic and is sort of completely askance with the way that construction is done in the United States and has been for probably more than a century or more, right? It's a well-established precedent.
Well, I guess just to follow up on that, and the circumstance I'm talking about, but if you have an instance where, for example, the travel lane is not being, travel lanes are supposed to be stabilized with that aggregate, stone or mulch, 6 inches. So what if they do come out like they have and said, okay, well, we've complied with this standard by putting down soil cement, right? But what if it proves that it's not actually effective? Because then the staff would either have to say, well, this still doesn't comply with the standard, or they just say, you need to put down stone or mulch, right?
Well, the inspector would say, you have not stabilized it, and you need to do it. Otherwise, we will begin enforcement against you in whatever the appropriate level of enforcement is. That's how I would sort of see them directing the contractor in a sense of what, really your work is not up to standard, up to the specification. So in other words, you have to figure out how to solve it, not really us. Because if you told them 6 inches and you actually needed 7 inches, for it to be stabilized, but if it's still not stabilized, we've lost the ability to take any enforcement action. We would then just have to keep moving the goal line, right? So I don't think that's a role we should really play in sort of helping the contractor to build anything or developer to build anything. That's really just not the role for the city to participate in. But right, we would enforce what the codes are that we are delegated to enforce.
Okay, well, I have some compromise language I'll bring up at the end for an amendment on the floor, which I think will help address some of this.
Okay, Alderman Tierney had a hand up, then Alderman Finlayson.
No, I didn't take it down. I'm done.
Yeah, thank you. Alderman Finlayson, is your hand up still?
Yes, I was just being premature by taking it down because I was going to be quick. We've heard from the Director of Public Works, we've heard from the former Director of Public Works, and we've heard from our pseudo contractor colleague on the City Council, all expressing support for this amendment, which is to delete lines 30 through 34. So I think I'm ready to vote.
Okay. Any other comments? Thank you. Is this 10 or 9? I apologize.
9. 9.
Thank you.
And it's Valentine's Day. I mean, really.
We've got to get through this complex resolution here.
Joe, tell him to stop.
Okay, all those in favor with show of hands say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Okay, thank you. Alderman Finlayson, number 10.
Number 10 is deleting on page 3, lines 35 through 37, deleting those lines and instead inserting the field correction notice shall require corrections within a timely period reviewed and approved by the director. All field correction notices shall be posted in a location accessible to the general public. In the original language, it said 24 hours. Well, 24 hours might be appropriate sometimes, but we're creating a resolution that is applicable at all times. So giving the director the control over the timeliness and giving the director an opportunity to review it, I think is important. And there's a public notification.
Can I get a second on that, please? Thank you. Alderman Savage had his hand up first, and Alderman Gay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, this one I do not support, and it's because it doesn't address one of the issues we've had, which was the field correction notice. Some of the field correction notices issued gave the contractor 3, 5, even 7 days to resolve things. And the problem with that is the code requires compliance every single day. So if the code requires every single day, why would we give them 3, 5, 7 days to resolve deficiencies? And this amendment, that's why I put in the original language for within 24 hours. Now, I think that, so the way this is currently worded, the amendment, is it still doesn't set the time frame. So it just says
timely
within a time of the period. So it still doesn't resolve. So and I think, again, I think the directors addressed some of this with some of the standard operating procedures, but again, if we have another administration, different director, we could have the same problem pop up again. So I think, granted, I know this isn't a code change, but this still makes it clear. And I think this hopefully, the director and I are both working on code changes. So hopefully this will work into the code in some manner. But I do have an amendment that would tweak this language to make it clear, to address the Alderwoman's point that it would be within at least 24 hours. So field correction notices should require corrections within at least 24 hours to make it clear that in some cases they may want, I used to require end of it, close of business the same day. And so I certainly want to prevent that. So I would what I would ask for is a no to this, and then I'll bring up my other amendment 12, which would tweak the language to make it clear. I just think it's really important to provide something to help make it clear that we don't want to see these field correction notices be dragged out too long.
You, Alderman Gay.
Yeah, I just had a quick question in general. Are these amendments recommended to the Alderwoman by staff?
Yes.
So these are staff's suggestions to the bill? Are they getting involved in policy?
No, I inquired with staff to get their professional opinion.
And they drafted this?
No, they didn't draft anything, but these are my amendments. Okay. I went to our professional staff to inquire on issues that concerned me about this legislation.
Okay. I was just wondering, that's all. It's great conversation. I'm learning a lot.
I have too.
Any other comments?
Mr. Mayor, could we again call on Mr. Director Johnson?
Sure, Director Johnson, please come forward.
if he'd like to speak to this amendment. Would it make a difference? You know, and what is in my head is when we were dealing with the issue a few weeks ago, and there had been a correction notice, and I think staff had given them 3 to 5 days or something like that. And then there was another infraction that changed it. I don't know. There is a timeline, I do believe, for these infraction notices, are there not?
Although, yes, the reason why being as prescriptive as to say 24 hours, I think could be a bit of a problem is that it doesn't really account for force majeure type events. What if we had a hurricane or a tornado or torrential rain? You really wouldn't want the contractor moving, attempting to move dirt under such conditions. That would actually worsen the outcomes, I suspect. So the protocol, I think that the timeframes which are stipulated in the departmental policy, the standard operating procedure, require that the inspectors be as stingy, if maybe that's to use that way, as they can be with the timeframes given to cure a particular problem, but it does not say that it has to be 24 hours because it doesn't, that assumes that it's a normal environment, which may not always be the case, right? And you may not be always able to fix something. If the ground is really frozen, suppose we had like negative temperatures and the ground is deep freeze, it may take longer to cure the effect than 24 hours, just to dig up the soil or something like that. You know, so there are many factors that can sort of work against us being able to comply with that, with our own rule of 24 hours. So leaving it a bit less, make it a little less prescriptive and sort of addressing the urgency. I'm in agreement with the alderman that lengthy periods, giving 3 or 5 or so days to cure a deficiency is not a practice that we should follow. But I would still like to have the latitude to, adjust the time frame for compliance based on the in situ condition that we're facing.
Thank you.
Alderman, I think Alderman Savage, then Alderman Pindell Charles, I think.
Yeah, just quick on that point. I do want to point out that the current language does allow for longer periods of, it says if longer period is needed for corrections, it must be reviewed and approved by the director. And so it does allow if we do have a situation with a tornado or whatever, and more time is needed. And again, my amendment would later on, Amendment 12, I think it was, would say that it could be less than 24 hours if they wanted.
More than 24 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Oops. So it'd be both. So it would say that they should typically require corrections within at least 24 hours. So they could do anywhere between 2 to 24 hours. And then it says if longer periods are needed, that they would have to get reviewed by the director to see if that longer period is needed.
Thank you. Alderman Pindell Charles.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just the mention of a tornado in this situation really makes my hair stand up on the back of my neck. And so I can only imagine if we had such a situation here in Ward 3 during that time, it would be quite, it wouldn't be the best possible way to handle it. So I'm only going on personal experience and drawing back from that situation. Thank you, Mr. Johnson, for bringing that example up. Appreciate it.
Okay, anyone else on amendment number 10? I'm sure you can make that.
Just to the original sponsor, Alderman Savage. So to my understanding, you're against this because of the time period, right? So you don't, this would undermine the original intent, just this amendment?
Yeah, because I'd like to provide some clarity on the time frame because I think the ambiguity has led to problems.
Okay, thank you.
Could we potentially table this amendment for Alderman Savage to present their timeline, or are we seconded it first and seconded and we gotta charge it in?
We're first and seconded, so I think we could probably use the same method we used before if you wanted, but I don't think Alderman Finlayson wants that. I believe that Alderman Savage is going to address it down the road. Is that right, Alderman Savage? You can make some tweaks to it. Okay, well, I'm supporting everybody today, so you guys ready? All those in favor say aye with a show of hands. Aye.
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 All those opposed say no.
No.
Thank you. Let's move on to Savage Amendments number 11 and 12.
At 12, I'm not going to move because it goes back to the Ways and Means. Amendment 12, 12 I'm going to adjust a bit. But in the meantime, I'm going to introduce a new amendment on the floor, which would be that on page 3, line 30. And this is the compromise I kind of mentioned earlier regarding the means and methods. So it'd be page 3, line 30. So it creates a new item number, I don't know, whatever the number would be, need to be in the sequence. I guess this would be new number 8. If field correction notices are issued, corrective actions shall be discussed with the enforcement agency to determine effectiveness of the corrective actions. So this just, again, so it requires that when an inspector issues a field correction notice that to the contractor saying, oh, you're not in compliance with this section of code, that they have to discuss with the enforcement agency about, what the corrective action is, so we can make sure that it is going to be adequate. And so we don't, and so we can make sure to say, well, hey, what you're proposing to do is not going to be enough. We need you to look at other options to make sure you're stopping pollution. I see.
Get a second, Regina, is that what you're looking for?
Oh.
His amendment would have to be 13.
Okay.
Thank you. Can we get a second for that, please? It sounds like what City Manager Gerald was expressing. Sounds like a good idea. Right. That they would describe the remedy. Is that what you're saying, Alderman Savage? Yep. Thank you.
Can he move his amendment?
I think you moved it.
I moved it. Yeah, sorry.
Sorry. Thank you. Any other discussion?
Yeah, I have a question. I guess either Mr. Gerald or Mr. Johnson regarding their input on this amendment.
Alderwoman, it sounds like a reasonable compromise. That the method could be discussed. I think it's in line with what City Manager Gerald was saying. So I could think that could work.
Okay,
thank you. I agree.
Thank you. All those in favor with a show of hands say aye.
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 Opposed? One opposed. Thank you. Alderman Savage?
Yeah, just one more to see if this would be better language for the other issue. It's very similar, but in any case, it would read, so this goes back to the issue of field correction notice time. So it would read, field correction notices should require corrections within at least 24 hours. If a longer period of time is needed for corrections, this must be reviewed and approved by the director and posted at a location accessible to the general public. That's kind of the language I was proposing to take into consideration some of the concerns we've heard.
It's a new amendment.
That's my motion, yeah, for a new
Number
amendment.
14. Yeah. Number 14, is that right, Regina? Can I get a second on that, please?
Second.
Any debate? I see no hands up.
I got one. Just because at this point I'm a bit not confused, but I'm a little lost. So I'll admit it. Just want to kind of with these amendments, because this is not my area of expertise, just want to get a little more handle from Director Gerald as well as Mr. Johnson and Mr. Gerald about this.
As was stated, that's sort of what Alderman Savage mentioned is sort of what is in our standard operating procedure. That is the guidance provided to inspectors for issuing citations. That wherever possible, they should be given 24 hours. And then if they're mitigating circumstances or extenuating circumstances, excuse me, that would prevent that from being the case, that the director would be required to agree on what the fining period is, what the cure period is. So it sounds like it's in line with our procedures. So I think it could work.
Okay.
It gives us the latitude to. It gives us the latitude to deal with extenuating circumstances.
Okay.
Thank you. Alderman Finlayson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So my question is, how does that jive with Amendment 10 that we just approved? Because we've gone back to the 24 hours as opposed to a timely period. We still have the review and approval by the director, and we've taken out the location that's accessible. That's a question.
It sounds the same to me, but Alderman Savage had his hand up. Mr. City Manager, let's get someone else in here.
Okay. So if the goal is to make sure that the time of response is more aggressive than it has been in the past, then Alderman Savage's amendment is the preferred one, because it specifies that unless otherwise approved by the director, that needs to be 24 hours. Amendment 10 doesn't say that. It just says within a timely period. Mm-hmm. So if you all want the time of response to be more aggressive than it has been, I would recommend Alderman Savage's amendment.
And there's no issue with the lack of accessibility. It says track it in the original language, accessibility in the amendment that we just approved.
I think one of the issues with Trackit is that Trackit is a specific piece of software which could or could not exist somewhere in the years down the road or months down the road. Software is volatile. So being specific again about where the records would be housed seemed to be like if Trackit didn't exist in say next year or 2 years from now, we would have to go through the exercise of changing this again because we really wouldn't be able to store it and track it. So making it more in a location that's more accessible, whether it's a city website, whether it's a third-party website, whether it's Trackit or some future technology, it seems to be like give us more latitude with the uncertainty of the future.
So potentially we could be limiting access by.
We could be limiting access, yes, because Trackit is just a piece of software that we use today, may not be what the city may use, years in the future or some defined period in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Savage.
Yeah, just to clarify, Alderman Finlayson, I am proposing to tack on, to use your language at the end there to say this must be reviewed and approved by the director and posted at a location accessible to the general public. So again, the whole thing would read, field correction notices should, and just to reiterate for staff, Page 3, line 35, it would insert a new number and say field correction notices should require corrections within at least 24 hours. If a longer period of time is needed for corrections, this must be reviewed and approved by the director and posted at a location accessible to the general public.
So since it contradicts with the Amendment 10, Mr. Lyles, how do we have to dispatch with 10 to, if the consensus is to support, what is that, 14? Because they are different. I mean,
you already passed 10. If 14 conflicts with it, you need to clear up the conflict before passing 14, or else it'll be legally insufficient.
That's my question. So should we reconsider 10? Was it 10? Reconsider 10 to defeat it so that we could pass 14?
Mr. City Attorney?
I'm thinking about that. 14 is legally insufficient because you already passed what you want. Now you want to do something else, which is a reconsideration of 10, which you can't do unless someone else who supported 10 comes and says, let's reconsider 10 and get rid of 10. The body voted on 10. 14 conflicts with 10. So I don't know how you're voting on 14.
Well, if it's supersede.
So couldn't I reconsider 10 since I was on the prevailing side? Ms. Eldridge has her hand up.
Regina's hand up there.
I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, because of the order of the voting and the order that the number 10 passed and number 14 passed after it, number 14 would supersede amendment number 10.
But we haven't voted on 14 yet.
I know you haven't finished the vote, but if it passes, it would supersede your number 10.
Okay, so it would automatically supersede. That was my question. Okay.
And that happened in a council meeting a couple of months ago, actually. The same exact thing happened with 2 amendments. And so, yeah, I was like, yeah.
Okay. Just want to be clear. Thank you.
Okay, so we have it on the floor here. We have a first and a second. All those in favor of the last amendment, I believe, of this complex resolution, all those in favor with a show of hands say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, say no.
No.
Okay, thank you. Ayes have it. Okay, I think that is the last one. So is there a motion to amend R-7-22 on second reader? Is that right? Regina?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor with a show of hands say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, say no. Thank you. Is there a motion to adopt R-7-22 as amended on second reader?
So moved. Second.
Madam City Clerk, please call the roll.
Yes, sir. Mayor Buckley?
Aye.
Alderman Finlayson?
Aye.
Alderman Shannemeyer?
Aye.
Alderman Gay?
Aye.
Alderman Savage?
Aye.
Alderman Arnett?
Aye.
Alderman Tierney?
Aye.
Alderwoman O'Neill?
Aye.
And Alderwoman Kendall Charles.
Aye.
That resolution passes.
Okay, Mr. City Attorney, please present the next item on the agenda.
Mr. Mayor, the agenda is completed.
No, we've all got sweethearts to get home to. Is there anything else for the good of the order?
Yes, I had 2 quick things because I had my hand up earlier and you missed it. With the watermarks, is it possible that we can have a copy of the leasing agreement as it relates to the dock?
We can get that. I'm sure that's public record. Is that, Mr. City Manager?
I'm sure it is. And yeah, we can get that. We can make that available.
I think we just voted to extend the lease just before Debbie sold the business. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, if possible, I still just like to see it for a little clarity on some things that were mentioned in some of the questions. And then my second question, is that virtual or is that your real bookcase, David? That behind you.
That's my house. That's
okay.
real, that's my house.
It's a nice,
house.
Nice built-in bookcase. I like that.
Nice. Anything else?
I have to ask this.
Alderman Tierney?
Yeah, on R9-22, on the concession agreement, is there a plan within the next 10 days or so to present something for the public to see?
Mr. City Manager?
I'm sorry, on the concession agreement?
Yes, sir.
Yes. So we hope to have that ready next Monday. So everybody have a week to review it prior to the public hearing and the second reader.
Thanks. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman O'Neill?
Yes, thank you very much. I do want to remind everybody that Wednesday evening is the ward boundary public hearing, 7 p.m. at Pitt Moyer. I've been receiving calls left and right from people all over my ward and all over the city about the redistricting maps, the ward maps. So I would like to see our supports, especially those that are receiving more people possibly into their wards, as well as those of us that will be losing parts of our wards.
Okay, Alderman Chenoweth, thank you. Kama.
Hey, Mr. Mayor, I do just want to note that Economic Matters is having its hearing at 6:30 that same day. So some of us, while we appreciate the work of the Boundary Commission, we will try to make it when our meeting is concluded. We still have our committee hearing to go. So
what's on the agenda for that? Is it?
There's some appointments and some legislation.
Okay. And lastly, are we going based off of Dr. K's presentation today? What's the deal with our presence within the council?
What do you mean by that, Alderman Gay? Sorry.
I mean, he said there's less than 20 people with COVID at the hospital, and that things seem to be trending downward. So are we going back in person?
Mr. City Manager.
We're not planning to yet. We're monitoring what CDC recommendations are, and as soon as they say that things are good to go, then we will come back, do it in person.
That's fine. I have no argument. That's fine with me. I just wanted to make sure.
Alderman Pendle-Charles.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Alderman Shandemeyer, I'm glad you brought up your Economic Matters Committee meeting that starts at 6:30 because we have our extended public safety meeting from 3:30 to 5:30. So we're definitely going to have a hard stop in order for our video crew to get prepared for breakdown for us and be prepared for you all. So thank you. We're going to respect your time.
Thank you. Okay. Alderman Arnett, can I get a motion to adjourn? Haven't heard much from you today.
That's the first time I've had a complaint about me being quiet. I move we adjourn.
Could I get a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.
Meeting adjourned.
Carl,